next speaker is David Cromwell Johnson. I want to say the famous David Cromwell Johnson because his reputation precedes him. He is a lawyer practicing in Birmingham, Alabama. He has also been a professor at 3 institutions down there, including the Birmingham School of Law, the Miles School at Law, and the University of Alabama in Birmingham. David Johnson has represented the high and mighty in Alabama. I recall when he represented Bill Baxley, when Bill Baxley sued Charlie Graddick, who had been selected as the Democratic candidate for governor. Don't we remember that election that Mr. Johnson was the lead counsel in having it invalidated, the Graddick election. I also remember that he has represented, as I see in the newspaper, Mayor Arrington, the mayor of Birmingham, Alabama, and he has also represented Governor Folsom in his continuing investigations that have been going on. But the most interesting case, I guess, that I've heard about that David Cromwell Johnson has done is the Jet Williams case, wherein Jet Williams, who was determined to be the daughter of Hank Williams, sued the estate, and after many, many years, and I want you to know from a legal standpoint, it was an extraordinary case and an extraordinary victory. He was able to determine and create the rights for Jet Williams, and I hope he'll tell us a little bit about it. David Johnson.
Everybody get one of these handouts, because I'm going to read from it first. I'm getting old, so I have to take my glasses off to read it. But the first quote I want to read you from is from Man for All Seasons. First place, I'm going to talk tonight on the criminal trial. But a lot of the things I say will apply to criminal and civil trials. But just to remind you all where we have been and to kind of by inference give you an idea of where we're going in this country today. And so you won't think too terribly badly about me before I start talking about defending people. I want to read some of these excerpts from A Man for All Seasons toward the bottom. So now you'd give the devil the benefit of the law. Sir Thomas More. Yes, what would you do? Cut a great road through the law to get after the devil? Roper. I'd cut down every law in England to do that. More. Oh, and when the last law was down and the devil turned round on you, where would you hide, Roper, the laws all being flat? This country's planted thick with laws from coast to coast, man's laws, not God's. And if you cut them down and you are just the man to do it, do you really think you could stand upright in the winds that would blow then? Yes, I'd give the devil the benefit of the law for my own safety's sake. And then there's a great editorial that appeared many, many years ago in 1956 in the Birmingham, or it was in the Birmingham News. Y'all read it when you get a chance, and we're talking about darkness and light and Jesus and Paul on the road to Damascus. And now let me read a few other appropriate quotes from some of the great men that have lived. Great nations rise and fall. The people go from bondage to spiritual truth, to great courage, from courage to liberty, from liberty to abundance, from abundance to selfishness, from selfishness to complacency, from complacency to apathy, from apathy to dependence, from dependence back again to bondage. Benjamin Disraeli. That's the third page of this handout. In Escobedo, Illinois, which is a famous case which said the police had to give, one of the two cases, Miranda being the other, that said police had to give people their rights before they got a statement from them. Of course, that was in 1964, and that is no longer the law today. If the exercise of constitutional rights will thwart the effectiveness of the system of law enforcement, then there is something very wrong with that system. That was written by a man that could not get confirmed in the United States Supreme Court today. Felix Frankfurter. The history of liberty has largely been the history of observance of procedural safeguards. That's Justice Felix Frankfurter. he could not get confirmed on the Supreme Court of the United States today. The exclusionary rule, which you have heard brought into such great disrepute, engenders confidence in government by preventing the courts from becoming participants in willful disobedience of the Constitution. Without the exclusionary rule, the great mandate of the Fourth Amendment would have little importance to the maintenance of a free society. That was the drafters of the Constitution that wrote that, and it was in the Federalist Papers. It may be that it is the next page, Justice Bradley. It may be that it is the obnoxious thing in its mildest and least repulsive form, but illegitimate and unconstitutional practices get their first footing that way, namely by silent approaches and slight deviations. It is the duty of the courts to be watchful for the constitutional rights of the citizen and against any stealthy encroachments thereon. Their motto should be obsta principis, resist the beginnings. Brandeis. The makers of our Constitution undertook to secure conditions favorable to the pursuit of happiness. They conferred, as against the government, the right to be let alone, the most comprehensive of rights and the most valued by civilized man. This is one of my favorites. Experience should teach us to be most on our guard to protect liberty when the government purposes are beneficent. Men born to freedom are naturally alert to repel invasion of their liberty by evil-minded rulers. The greatest dangers to liberty lurk in the insidious encroachment by men of zeal, well-meaning but without understanding. Chambers v. Florida, the last part of this quote. Tyrannical governments had immemorially utilized dictatorial criminal procedure and punishment to make scapegoats of the weak, of the helpless, political, religious, and racial minorities, and those who differ, who would not conform, and who resisted tyranny. Justice Jackson on the next page. The Fourth Amendment rights are not mere second-class rights, but belong in the catalog of indispensable freedoms. The Fourth Amendment rights are your right to be, essentially to be secure in your house, in your home, in your car, in your person. Among the deprivations of rights, none is so effective in cowing a population, crushing the spirit of the individual, and putting terror in every heart. Uncontrolled search and seizure is just one of the first and most effective weapons in the arsenal of every arbitrary government. The right to be secured against searches and seizures is one of the most difficult to protect. Since the officers are themselves the chief invader, there is no enforcement outside of the court. That is particularly interesting in light of the so-called good faith exception to the warrant requirement for probable cause. Thomas Jefferson. In questions of power, then let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down by the mischief, from his mischief by the change of the Constitution. Jefferson also said, but it's not in here, that eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. He also said that every time the legislature in session, every man, woman, and child in America is in danger. When the search for truth is confused with political advocacy, the pursuit of knowledge is reduced to the quest for power. And then Lincoln. What constitutes the bulwark of our own liberty and independence? It is not our frowning battlements, our bristling seacoasts, our army, and our navy. These are not our reliance against tyranny. All of these may be turned against us without making us weaker for the struggle. Our release is in our love of liberty which God has planted in us. Our defense is in the spirit which prime liberty is the heritage of all men in all lands everywhere. Destroy this spirit and you have planted the seeds of despotism at your door. Familiarize yourself with the chains of bondage and you prepare your own limbs to wear them. Accustomed to trample on the rights of others, you have lost the genius of your own independence and become fit subjects for the first cunning tyrant who rises among you. I say all these things because the criminal justice system is terribly misunderstood. And maybe the system is misunderstood. Maybe it's precisely understood. But you, the American people, you people sitting out here in this audience tonight, have given up, or in the process of giving up voluntarily, the heritage that makes us Americans. It's happening every day. More laws are getting passed. I say all those things because you asked me Everybody asks me when I make a speech, how can I defend people who are supposedly quote-unquote guilty? And, of course, my answer to that is that it is a jury's duty to decide that ultimately. You know, the real question when you're in trial law, and it doesn't matter whether you're in a criminal case or a civil case or any case, if you're a trial lawyer, the real question is, what is the truth? And the problem is, what is the truth can't be divorced from who we are and what we think and what we believe. Is Martin Luther King a great man? Is George Wallace really sorry for standing in the doorway? Was George Wallace a bigot? Was Betty Wilson guilty? Was Peggy Lowe innocent? Is O.J. Simpson guilty? Is Jesus the Son of Man? Is he the Son of God? Did he rise from the dead? Did he raise the dead? Did he walk on water? You see, every single day in our lives we're confronted with what is the truth. But when we walk into the criminal courtroom, somehow the guy that sits on the side that defends a citizen against the prosecutor is thought as a bad person. I mean, I see it in people when they walk in the courtroom. Matter of fact, I would say that fully 70% of the people here tonight would look at me just because I'm a defense attorney and not like me right off the bat. That's because you can't get away from your associations. I would hate to go to trial is this Madison County? All the engineers, the people at the Rocket Center, the retired military people. You know, let me just tell you something. If you die and you go to heaven or hell or wherever it is, and you look up and St. Peter is either a nurse or a retired military man, you're in trouble. And if he's an accountant, you have no chance whatsoever. So how do people make up their minds about what the truth is? You know, how do you decide what happens in the courtroom, who's telling the truth and who's not telling the truth? Well, what people look for in a trial lawyer is they look for trustworthiness, competence, and you have to be dynamic. And really all that boils down to is one word: hard work. Hard work. Hard work. There is no substitute in life for hard work. Give me the hard worker. Give me the guy that's not as smart, that's not as fast, that can't leap as high. Give me the hard worker, the guy that cares, the guy that will stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning to fight for his client or to interview that extra witness or whatever. Give me that person every time. Because it gets translated into competence and trustworthiness when you speak to people. Now, this lady's still skeptical. She's looking at me like, this man is a snake oil salesman. And I'm beginning to like him. I can't make up my mind. But, you know, when you go before a jury, the first thing you do is, believe it or not, I mean, these are just irrefutable truths. It's hard for people to believe, but in the first 4 minutes, you make up your mind about 40% of the people make up their mind about a case in the first 4 minutes. That means they walk in the room, they see everybody, they sit down, they look around, and they made up their minds. 4 minutes. And another 40% have made up their minds after the opening statement is over and before any evidence is ever presented. And you know what? We're not just talking about the courtroom. We're talking about life. We're talking about what happens with you in your business every day, what happens with you at church, what happens when you meet people, what happens when you go to a party. These principles apply to all of life. I mean, there's nothing. One of the most important things I learned, in addition to one of the first things I did when I was 30 years old when I got out of law school, and I was old then. I'm older now. You know, I never had thought about what the truth was. That's why I've given you those examples that I gave you. And I really, in the study of the life of Jesus, and I don't mean to be sacrilegious about it in any way, it's where I began to understand how would God communicate with us if he was trying to communicate. Think about it. If he walked in today. I mean, it blows your mind when you're really trying to think about that. And then the next thing I came up with is human nature doesn't change. You know, cars get better, TVs get better, VCRs are getting smaller. They're about to come out with a TV that's got so many little things in it that it's crystal clear, you know. Maybe someday they'll figure out how to get my eyesight back. You know, I'm taking pills to make me younger. Maybe that'll work. So far it hadn't. My hair keeps falling out even faster. But human nature doesn't change, folks. It has never changed in the history of the world. It will not change tonight, and it won't change 1,000 years from now if we're still here, which I seriously doubt, because of what we're doing to ourselves. It won't change in 1,000 years. If Jesus walked in the door tonight, we would crucify him again. There would be there'd be another Peter, there'd be another Paul, there'd be some disciples, there'd be another Pontius Pilate. All these things get repeated every day, over and over and over in our lives. And after it was all over with, just like we are today, everybody would give him lip service and nobody would live according to his principles. Which, if you think about it, that's, you know. I mean, does being a Christian make us more compassionate? Does it make us turn the other cheek? Does it make us live by those principles? No, it doesn't. I'm not lecturing to y'all. I'm just saying these are just ideas and thoughts, and this is what we all bring into the courtroom every time we come into the courtroom, either you as jurors or me as an attorney. So if I come in and I don't know what I'm talking about and I don't know what the facts are and I stumble around and I bring a bunch of books, which in my way is just another word for cowardice. Now, if you see a guy that comes in with a whole sack of books, that means he's scared to death. He doesn't know what to do. Really. Because he's got to rely on something other than himself. So that's one of the indicators to me that I'm doing something right with the other guy at any rate. You never can tell about a jury. But so you have to, you know, so why are they going to believe you? A jury's going to believe you because, and I'll talk about it in the opening statement, because it goes back to the old Indian folklore of the storyteller. You've got to tell a story that touches people's hearts. That means you've got to analyze your case and you've got to present it to people in such a way that it rings a chord. There's a book called Mystic Chords of Memory in American Thought. And Joseph Campbell writes about it. I study anthropology books. I study Joseph Campbell. I study Bill Moyers, all those people, because they're talking about how we communicate, how legends, myths, things we don't even understand, impress the way we think. So when I come in and I'm sitting there and you come in and you're the jury and you got 4 minutes and some of you all made up your mind, and then I get up and speak, and you know, then the charge is read, and you immediately, 35% of the American people think the defendant is guilty, and you got to prove his innocence. Which means that the presumption of innocence that our forefathers, remember, our forefathers were revolutionaries. The men who would now be in disrepute in this country were revolutionaries. George Washington was a rich man. He was willing to risk it all, risk everything he had in the world, all of his farms and all of his land and all of everything he had, to fight against tyranny. Jefferson, all those people. There's a book about the signers of the Declaration of Independence, most of whom were destroyed because they signed the document. But these men were revolutionaries. They had studied a great definition of insanity. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again but expecting a different result. They had studied human nature. That's why I bring up human nature. There's no question in my mind that this country was divinely inspired. This country was touched by God. Matter of fact, a friend of mine gave me a picture of Stonewall Jackson tonight. Sitting over there somewhere. Where is it? Right there. And I look at Stonewall Jackson and I say, God did not mean for the South to win the war. That's the only conclusion you can draw. You look at Normandy and you say, God did not mean for the United States to lose the Second World War. Well, God meant for, in my opinion, God meant for this country to be founded as a bulwark against tyranny. God meant for these great minds, James Madison, Monroe, Jefferson, Franklin, the people that wrote the Federalist, John Jay, John Adams, all those people, all these great minds, to come at one point in history. How do you think that the miracle just of this country beating England? I mean, and then winning the War of 1812. Isn't that incredible? You think it could happen again? You think it could happen without divine intervention? And they lay down these laws, and they say we distrust government. They say that the RT has been thrown into Boston Bay. Our houses have been searched. Our money has been taken with illegal taxes. They've violated every single law we have. As a matter of fact, they violated so many laws that the Bill of Rights, which is the first 10 amendments, which are now held in such disrepute by the American people. The Bill of Rights are held in disrepute by the American people. Many of you who are in this room because you haven't thought about it. They said the Bill of Rights are so implicit to this country that we don't even have to put them in the Constitution. They're so fundamental to the way we believe. And then somebody said, we better put them in the Constitution because if we don't, we won't have them. Well, they were right about that. They were right about that. So, you know, you study human nature. Lawyers aren't special. One of the funniest things I've ever seen, you know, I told you I graduated from law school when I was 30, so I started to understand things about life until after I, you know, it's been hard. Matter of fact, I'm thinking about writing a book. If my father had told me that life would be this hard, I would have stayed at home. Really, I'm not kidding. Politicians. Have you ever noticed politicians? They think there's something special. They are just servants of the people. They are there because you have elected them. They ought to be serving you. And the same thing is true of lawyers. Lawyers, I mean, the other thing I always like when I see another lawyer with books is that he has big words. You know, as if he's got some kind of special language he wants to communicate with y'all. I want to communicate with y'all in a language you understand. Lawyers aren't special. I'm asking you at the end of the case to give me your vote. And so I ought to deserve to get that vote. Now, we had something happen in this country, and I bet you that 90% of these people in this room think O.J. Simpson guilty. And it really doesn't matter what you think. I mean, I'm not bringing the subject up for that reason. What I'm bringing the subject up for is because we had an American jury that was brought on the carpet and criticized for their verdict. That is despicable. That American jury who sits there for a year and takes a year out of their time should be criticized. Why? Because the prosecution dropped the ball. Because they did a sorry job. That's why. I worked with the same people that did the prosecution jury selection in the O.J. Simpson case, and they told them this is not a case about spousal abuse, it's a case about race. You know, if people don't understand DNA evidence when they come in this courtroom, they're not going to believe it when they hear it. And so what do? The first 2 months of that trial, they spend putting on a spousal abuse case. What are they? They're wasting the jury's time. And then they put on the stuff about the DNA at a time when people have turned them off. You know, most of you folks in here are my age. Some of you all younger, a few. In our lifetimes, we have gone from a literary society to a visual society. What does that mean? That means that I go home at night and I read a book. Somebody 30 years old goes home at night and they watch television. Unless sports is on, I do watch sports. And I'm an Auburn fan. And they're going to beat Florida. I'm also an optimist. What does this mean? That we have a visual society. That means that people, you have to earn their attention. People don't just come into the courtroom because you're a juror and say, well, you know, he's a lawyer, I'm going to listen to him because he's a lawyer. They're not going to listen to you unless you have something to say to them. They're not going to listen to you unless you're talking to them. And so you have got to deserve their attention. And the next thing is this principle of primacy, which I said people make up their minds real quick. Once they make up their minds about you, they're not going to listen to you if they don't like you, unless the other side messes up real bad or you do some incredible things to change their mind about you. And this would be true if you met somebody at a party. This would be true if you met somebody on the street. So you don't have long to do it, and you've got to communicate with people. You've got to talk to people in words and language that they understand, that they will relate to. Another thing is that you're always on camera when you're in the courthouse, walking to the courthouse, going to the courtroom, in the courtroom, outside during breaks, at lunch, when you're parking your car, whatever. So always act like a gentleman. Of course, I'm a believer that life is too long. It is not life is too short, life is too long. So that, for example, I have a philosophy with judges and with other attorneys that my word is my bond. If I give a handshake, I live up to my handshake. Of course, a contract isn't better than a handshake, any better than a handshake anyway if you're dealing with a crook or somebody's trying to cheat you. And when I say life is too long instead of life is too short, you can't pull dirty tricks and sneaky tricks and backhanded tricks on people over a period of your life without the Bible admonition, prophecy coming true. You do reap what you sow. There's no question about it, folks. No question about it. Jefferson and Tolstoy took the words of Jesus out of the four Gospels and cut them out when they were in their 70s and just read that. Do that sometime. Just read the words of Jesus in the Gospels about the truisms in life that you see over and over and over in the Bible. Well, at any rate, you're always on camera. Your client is always on camera. I just saw a TV program, I think it was last night, with Jack Lemmon, and there was this black guy, and the black guy, I didn't watch it very long because it wasn't very good. You see, I mean, I'm just like what I'm telling you all. If they don't get my attention right up off the bat, then I'm going to, what do they call it? Surfing? Yeah. I'm going to surf. I was surfing anyway last night because the Braves were way ahead. Tomorrow night I'm going to be biting my nails. But this guy's dressed up in a suit. See? Have you ever been in court as a witness or a juror or something, and you've seen somebody, they come into court and they look uncomfortable? Don't do that to your client. I mean, I've got to wear a suit. Matter of fact, I've got to wear a blue suit. I have got to wear a blue suit because everything I've ever read in my life tells me that all the blue suit is, the other guy's going to be wearing a blue suit too, maybe a gray suit. But all it just puts us on the same key. Matter of fact, I wear a wild tie tonight, and I had one lady, I was on TV one night, she said she didn't trust me because I wore a wild tie. Because it's something different. She's probably right. I'm going to wear the wild tie anyway. Because I want you all to see that I got a little bit of fire in the old, whatever it's called. And so I'm trying to communicate with you. What did you say? What's it called? The furnace? I better not ask. But let your client dress the way he goes to work. Let your client dress the way he lives every day. Don't dress him up in a suit if he doesn't wear a suit. Don't make him uncomfortable. Don't make him look out of place, because the jury's going to see that. You know, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Whether or not the glove fits or the glove doesn't fit or whatever, in the O.J. Simpson case, that was the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. I had that happen to me one time. I was in a small county in Alabama, and the greatest lawyer in the world had come in to whip my redneck you-know-what. And so he decided, the first thing he told this jury was that this widow lady had already gotten workman's compensation and she didn't need any more money because her husband died. That's the first thing he said. And this next thing he did is he insisted on there being a demonstration for the jury. And it was a scaffolding case, and the scaffold was rickety, and the scaffold, in our case, broke off, and the husband fell 30 or 40 feet and died. So this guy sets up this demonstration. And guess what? The guy falls, he sets it up, the scaffold falls, the guy falls 30 or 40 feet before the jury. He didn't die. But that lawyer from California did. Well, the point is, you don't do something like that. You don't try a demonstration in front of a jury unless you know how it's going to come out. Because if it backfires on you, I mean, how can you ever convince somebody that's seen that the glove doesn't fit that's supposed to fit? How can you go against that? A picture is worth 1,000 words. And the way you look is important, and it's how you are received. The way a witness looks. So, you know, I'm not going to let a witness. I remember one case, I was a prosecutor for 5 years before I got religion. And I remember one case, this guy comes in, he's got a tattoo on his arm. 3 people had tried to prosecute him and nobody could convict him. So finally they gave it to me. So he got a tattoo on one arm that says, "Born to raise hell." And on the other arm it said, "Mother sucks." I swear to God, I mean, I'll never forget it. I just made sure the jury saw those tattoos. And folks, that's the end of that case. I mean, I'm not being trite. That's because that's all you got to see to know who this guy is. I remember another case. This guy, big old black guy, 6'6". This is a bombing. This is a go-go. This is back, now I've gone over to the side of Satan. And I'm representing a go-go club owner. And he is supposed to have bombed another go-go club. And he is supposed to have used this assortment of people to do it. Well, one of the star witnesses for the prosecution is this great big old guy, 6'6". He's black. He comes in with sunglasses, a great big old white hat, and a white suit with boots, red boots, with what do you call them? Taps on them, spikes. Not spurs, but taps. I mean, no, you could see the silver. And a little old white girl is about 15 years old, and their illegitimate child. Well, do you think he's going to have any credibility with any jury? I mean, we're talking about life, folks. I mean, you know, everybody, when I start talking about things like this, people start getting jumpy. Oh, my God, you can't. But this is what life is all about. This is what life is all about. How can you believe a guy like this? Of course, he couldn't tell his story straight no matter how many times he told it. That was another small problem he had. But the point is that he didn't present the kind of appearance where anybody ever given any credibility. And the prosecution should have done a better job in that case of preparing him, just like with Mark Furman. I mean, who cares whether he used the N-word or not? That's the craziest thing I ever heard in my life. Who cares? Who cares? But he lied about it. Something that's really not even important, in my opinion. There are a lot of things that happened in that case were more important than that. But it just, down the drain he goes because of that one stupid thing he shouldn't have said in the first place. Because he wasn't prepared properly. Because he was trying to apologize for something he didn't need to apologize for. And so he offended the juries in that way. Oh, so now we're down. We've all sat down. We've all made up our minds. And we're trying to strike the jury, which is the most misunderstood part of the whole process. You don't strike the jury. You strike who you don't want on the jury. I'm serious. I'm serious. If you had a blackboard, you got, let's say there's 24 people, and you got to get down to 12, and each side has 6 strikes. So each side gets to select 6 people they don't want on the jury. And that's how it goes. Now, how do you come down to making that determination? How do you decide which 6 you don't want? I've been doing this for 25 years, and I get worse and worse all the time. I'm honest. I'm really. It just frustrates me no end. The older I get, the worse I get at it. because the people that I like don't like me. But you're trying to get them to tell you information. The problem is, jurors, nobody in a courtroom this big, in a big case, is going to stand up and say, I'm prejudiced, I don't like this, or I don't like that, or they're not going to admit things like that. It's just against human nature. You can't expect them to. So what you have to do is sneak in these little questions where they are giving you information, but they don't know that they're giving you the information you want. Like, for example, are you a member of the NRA? Mad mothers. Are you pro-life? You know, these causes and things that tell you a lot about a person. Two of my favorite questions are, what kind of bumper sticker do you have? I had a case one time, and this person had bumper sticker said, justice. So I said, well, what does that mean? He said, well, I believe, you know, we ought to get the sword and the anvil out and strike down the heathen, or something like that. I knew that I didn't want that kind of justice. So a lot of what it has to do is you're looking at what people tell you, and like I said, they'll mislead you, or they won't always tell you the truth because it's just not human for them to tell you the truth in a big crowd. If you pass out a jury questionnaire, you get a lot of information. And people will tell you the truth because then they can put that down. Their privacy is not being invaded. A lot of people resent the fact you're asking them questions in front of everybody. They don't want to answer. What do they look like? Where do they work? What occupation did they have? How are they married? How many children do they have? Are they an only child? All these things. You consider all those things, and then you decide about the jury. That brings you to the opening statement. How much time do I have left?
20 minutes.
Oh, good. All right. Well, we may get through. That brings me to the opening statement. It brings me back to the whole essence of everything. I'm telling you, it took me a long time to figure out what life was all about, and I'm still figuring it out, by the way. Matter of fact, the more that I know, the more I realize I don't know. And just like I was writing this paper for tonight at 5 o'clock in Birmingham, wondering how I was going to get here in time. And I was thinking, I can't remember, I can't believe I've forgotten all this stuff. Because, you know, you get bad habits, and you lose your discipline, and you get old, and you want to go home, and I got a little 7-year-old boy, and you want to play soccer with your little boy, and your wife wants you to, you know how wives are. Your wife wants to put the collar when you come in the door and say, okay, now here, boy, you sit. Sit. No, that's right. Don't you bark. I can bark at you, but don't you bark. But, so I'm trying to figure out, how do you communicate with people? And the way you communicate with people is the way the Indians used to communicate with people. I had it for 10 years before I realized what it was. I bought something by Frank McCarthy. No, Howard Turpin. It's called The Storyteller. So in India, they used to, you know, in the Bible, they used to pass things down by word of mouth. The Indians used to pass things down by word of mouth. In the old times, they used to pass things down by word of mouth. That's one of the myths and part of the mythology and the anthropology of mankind is the storyteller. If you'll see the entertainers you like on television, tell us a good story. The comedians, all these people, the Ronald Reagan, I mean, I was driving home one time and Ronald Reagan was talking about prayer. It was National Prayer Day. I swear, by the time I had gotten home, there were tears in my eyes. It was such a great story. It was such a great story. Well, one thing is what he said, and the other thing is he said it from his heart. Well, that's what the storyteller is all about. You tell a story that hits these mystic chords, that these things that we know in our hearts and souls are true, and that's what we make our decisions on in life. That's how you communicate with people. You humanize your client. An example of a case you all know, two cases you all know, are Mike Tyson, who I think was innocent, and William Kennedy Smith. And I don't know any more than you all do about him. I don't even really have any belief about him. But William Kennedy Smith, the Kennedy family came down there. You know, they all came down. They all rallied around him. His lawyer put his arm around him, you know, touched him, didn't treat him like he was anathema. Mike Tyson was also defended by a great lawyer, but they set him at the other end of the table and treated him like he was a piece of dirt. They wouldn't even communicate with him. They talked about him bad. Well, if they don't like their client, how can they ever expect the jury to like him? I mean, this is a woman that meets him in a hotel room at 2 o'clock in the morning, and she is wearing a menstrual pad, and she takes it off voluntarily, and then she says she is raped. And he can't win that case? Talking about defying what we all know is true. But Mike Tyson serves time in jail because his lawyer treated him like he was dirt, because his lawyer didn't humanize him, because his lawyer didn't care about him. And if you don't care about your client, then get out of the courtroom. If you don't care about your client's case, then get out of your courtroom. Let him at least have a chance to find somebody that does. So in your opening statement, you tell the story. And you preface it with the words, we expect the evidence to show this, and we expect the evidence to show that. And you make a contract with the jury. Because, as I said, not only is life too long instead of too short, but a trial is too long instead of too short. And you're always on camera, and you're always being watched, and you're always being evaluated. And if you want to be trustworthy, you've got to be trustworthy. If you want to be believed as trustworthy, you've got to be trustworthy. And you can't make promises to people you don't keep. And you can't lie to the jury. So if you promise them things you can't deliver, then you're being insincere with them. Why should they? You don't deserve their respect. You talk about the evidence. You talk about what you expect the evidence to show. You talk a little bit about the presumption of innocence, which I've already told you nobody really believes in. Where there's fire, there's smoke. I mean, it's just a principle of life. Of course, there must be something to it, or the person wouldn't be sitting here. And most of us, especially most of you all, most of white America, believe that the police don't do wrong. In spite of the fact that this country was founded on the principle that inevitably they do wrong. Because it is the nature of the institution, not the individuals. I represent them all the time, for nothing. I'm the PBA lawyer. That means the Police Benevolent Association. When they get a civil rights suit against them, or the FBI goes after them and they get themselves in real trouble, I represent them. So as individuals, they're patriots. But as an institution, they're tyrannical. And they have always been tyrannical because human nature doesn't change, and it never will. They will be the lackeys for the powerful and the tyrannical as long as there are police on this earth. Now, you all may not like to hear that, but it's the truth. And that's why we have laws. We have laws to protect ourselves against men, to protect ourselves against the devil, because if we don't give the devil his due, as Sir Thomas More said, if we don't give him the benefit of the laws, the guilty, in other words, in the criminal case, then when the devil turns on you and there are no laws to protect anyone, then you will be naked. And it's happened over and over and over again in history, and that's why I talk to you about insanity. I mean, my God in heaven, folks. Think about living in Iraq today. Remember the two son-in-laws that went back about 60 days ago thinking, I mean, how could they know anything about this man and go back? You know, there were two son-in-laws and they fled the country, and they were their daughters, and they'd been big officials and everything, and he said, if you come back, I'll be nice to you. And they were shot within, 3 hours. After probably they were mutilated and tortured beyond belief. But the point is that there ought to be a presumption of innocence because it's something that our forefathers believed in. And beyond a reasonable doubt is something our forefathers believed in. You don't prove anybody innocent in a criminal trial. You think... They asked me about O.J. Simpson the night before the verdict came in, what I think the verdict was. I said it can't be anything else but innocent. I didn't know until afterwards that they were betting on it. It just killed me. The one bet sure thing in my lifetime, and I missed it. It's the story of my life, by the way. It couldn't have been anything else but innocent. You know, and because the jury did their job. I mean, they didn't have any choice, in my opinion. But let me say, there was a reason why I brought all that up, and that was not to tell you that it couldn't have been anything that I predicted it correct. Oh, what I said was, though, at the same time, is I said that he'd be better off if the jury found him guilty, because he will wind up the most despised man in the world. And so, you know, as human beings, we get so personally involved, and we want to have our own pound of flesh. You know, we want to participate in the dismemberment. Like, you know, it was just on last night on HBO, William Wallace, Braveheart, drawn and quartered. You know, they cut your heart out of your body. This is the king doing this, with the people coming to view it all, and cut your entrails out and put it on top, and then they stretch your limbs, and then they break them, and then they pull you apart, and it's terrible. It's terrible. Yes, and we all want to do that now. And all these victims groups, you know, the prosecutors found out that gives them more political power. So they get the victims group together, and I'll never forget a case I had one time where they drugged this poor old man in. He wanted to forget. He wanted to forgive. He wanted to move on with his life, and they wouldn't let him. Listen, folks, God punishes us in this lifetime. Nobody gets away with it. I believe that. Nobody gets away with it. Now, we also may be, like I say about myself sometimes, I've been such a bad boy that he's getting a head start. That's why he's going to let me live long. But I believe that God punishes all. And you know, let's look at O.J. Simpson. What means so much to him is what other people think about him. You know, the great hero, and all that's destroyed for all time. Should be. Should be. Should be. Should be. Because, I mean, if you ask me what my personal opinion is, I think he did it. But the prosecutor didn't prove it. And the worst thing you can do for the American people is to let a half-assed prosecutor come in with a sloppy case and do a bad job and then ask the jury, take this off my hands. You know, I'm incompetent, I don't deserve the verdict, but take it off my hands and give it to me anyway. Now, you're talking about tyranny, folks, that you have opened the door to hell right there. And that's what we've done. We've said to the police, you can lie and get away with it. You all probably don't know that, but the United States Supreme Court has said in Franks versus Delaware, police can lie and nothing will be done. I forget the case in California that said that they can withhold exculpatory evidence and nothing will happen. In other words, they can withhold evidence of innocence. Doesn't matter. They can do all kinds of things. It doesn't matter. The point is that, you know, I get off on these tangents. I'm what they call a true believer. I believe in what I'm saying, well, I mean, the prosecutor once said that about me, is trying to condemn me in front of a college class, said that people like me were dangerous. And it's bad for me because I get excited about it, and I believe, and I get emotionally involved, and then I start losing my self-discipline and my control, and and then I don't communicate as effectively. So let's talk about direct examination. In direct examination, we go right back to the whole idea of appearance. You can't have any tattoos talking about mother sucks or born to raise hell. You've got to look nice. You've got to have your hair cut. I should have gotten my hair cut before I came up here tonight, but I've just been too busy. And I want you all to know I wear my hair this way because my wife wants me to, okay? But, the witness has got to look good, and then you've got to prepare the witness. That does not mean you have to tell the witness what to say. But what I say by preparing the witness, sometimes I bring the witness into the courtroom. I've seen people so scared they can't communicate. I saw a girl lose her child not too long ago because she couldn't communicate. She was so scared she couldn't talk. And the judge took a 7-year-old girl away from her mother. And the father, one of the meanest SOBs I ever saw in my life. So, you know, it's not just me. I mean, I taught school for 17 years at one school, and for 10 years at another school, and for 5 years at another school, and for 5 years I taught every night of the week and worked every day. It's the best thing I ever did. Because even though I was sitting here tonight, I still have goosebumps. And I still get nervous. And I still have fear. But how do you overcome fear? You go back to preparation. I looked for 30 years to find out how to overcome fear. If a lawyer walks in this this place and tells you all that we don't have fear, they're crazy. If a real trial lawyer walks in here and says they can hardly wait till the last case, they're not a real trial lawyer. Because it's like the story Knock 'Em Out John by Jerry Clower. Y'all ever hear that? Anybody ever hear that? About these guys were going coon hunting down there, and this is a way of telling the story. These guys were going Ray Bell, Marcel, and somebody Ledbetter. They were coon hunters down in swamps in Louisiana. So they were coon hunting one night, and they got on the scent of the biggest coon that they had ever been after in the whole time they'd been hunting. So they finally, their idea was that they were hunting with 40 or 50 dogs. There were 10 men with shotguns, automatic shotguns, and 40 or 50 dogs. And what they do is those dogs would run a coon up one of these great big old pine trees down there in Louisiana, about 60 or 70 feet in the air, and Marcel Ledbetter would take off his shoes and dig his toenails into the tree and climb up that tree 60 or 70 feet where it was pitch dark. You couldn't see a thing. And he would take a stick out of his back. He wore overalls, coveralls, you know what I'm talking about. Take a stick, and he would get out there on that limb, and whack, he'd hit that old coon and knock him down there, and that coon would fall 60 or 70 feet, and if he could whip those dogs, they'd let the coon go. That was their idea of sportsmanship. So, he gets up there that night, they treat this great big old coon. He gets up there, he digs his toenails in, he goes up 70 feet, he gets out on that limb, he pulls a stick out, he gets out there, he whack, he hits that thing. Except it ain't a coon. It's a bobcat. What folks in that part of the country call a souped up wildcat. And all you can hear down below, see, they can't see up there. They're down there saying, "Knock him out, John." All you can hear is, "Woo! Shoot that thing." They keep saying, "Knock him out, John." He keeps saying, "Woo, shoot that thing." The thing goes about 5 minutes, and they finally say, "Well, John said, we can't shoot up there, we might hit you." He said, "Well, shoot up here amongst us, because one of us has got to have relief." What I'm trying to tell you about a trial is if you get in trial with a sure enough trial, well, it doesn't matter whether you win or lose, you want to go to the hospital. But at any rate, so you familiarize your client, and you tell him what the goal of what he's doing is. You let him say it in his own words. Don't try to put words in their mouth, but you tell him what we're doing, what this is all about, and what your goal is, what the other lawyer's going to try to do to you, that type of thing. Then we come to cross-examination. Cross-examination, when any one of these three things goes, folks, it's all over for this country. The right to confront and cross-examine the witnesses against you, and it's already gone in child molestation cases. Children no longer have to come into court and confront the person they accuse, which is terrible. I'm sorry it happens to children, but to do that, you get right back to the Star Chamber where all the king had to do was write down the charge and submit it, and you were guilty. The right to confront, cross-examine witnesses, the right to a jury trial, which they're also trying to do away with. You know, all these big verdicts they talk about, these runaway verdicts, they're criticizing the American people. And I would, once again, believe that 90% of y'all here go right along with tort reform, and you think that just it's all outrageous and business is getting raped. Well, you're going to get what what you're asking for. Just like all you folks that want to be protected at any cost are going to get what you're asking for. Or you're not going to get it, your children are going to get it, and your grandchildren are going to get it. And then the First Amendment, the right to free speech, free press, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly. But at any rate, cross-examination. I love this quote. Be mild with the mild, shrewd with the crafty, confiding with the honest, merciful to the young, the frail, and the fearful, rough on the ruffian, and a thunderbolt to the liar. It is, well, you know, people like the criminal trials more because it's got so many things that are interesting to us. It's like, if you've ever heard the David Allan Coe record about the perfect country and western song, you know, I got drunk, I got out of prison, it was raining, I was in my mother's pickup truck, and my gun rack was on the back. It has everything, all the themes that I've been talking about, you know. The closing statement. Well, by now, the point I was going to make about the closing statement, how much time I got? We're about it? 2 minutes. Well, that's all I need for the closing statement. Because it's not that important, folks. Because if you haven't been listening to me so far, you're not going to listen to me in the closing statement. That somebody doesn't just put their gas, you just don't lay back the whole trial and then all of a sudden put your foot on the gas and say, all right, now I'm going to turn on the charm and win the case. It doesn't happen like that.
To the extent that this educational program could be construed as an advertisement for any member of the faculty, the following statement is required by the bar. There is no representation made that the quality of legal services to be performed is greater than that of the services performed by any other lawyers.